Hey watch friends, today we're going to check out the latest offering from the Italian microbrand Gravithin, and this is their Focuscope. This one's going to be launching directly on their website on January 16th of 2024, and if you care to check it out, I'll of course have a link down in the video description. The starting price is going to be right around $409 US, and that's going to include the strap as well as a bracelet we'll check out and look at the other goodies as well. I do want to mention up front, this is a prototype loaned to the channel, but in case you saw that banner, they do intend to send a production version. The namesake for this is actually inspired by Galileo's telescope, which sticks with the space theme that we've seen from this brand in the past if you've checked out prior reviews, and we'll bring in the ArgoMatic, which was one of their past models. So now let's just dive straight into the specs. This one is scaled down from the ArgoMatic, and it's coming in at the case is roughly from the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position at 40 millimeters. The case itself does actually taper and step down towards the top, and I measured that at roughly 38.5 millimeters. So it's about a millimeter and a half step down as you work your way up the case. The lugs are going to be a strap change friendly 20 millimeters, and we'll talk about this. There's somewhat of a hidden lug kind of design there. The lug to lug, because this does have partial lugs out here, is actually only coming in at 37.2 millimeters. So it's almost just a straight round case. However, it does technically have slight lug protrusion there. The overall thickness is coming in at 10.9 millimeters, and that is inclusive of this flat sapphire crystal. The crystal itself does have an inner AR coating. As you can see, it can pick up some reflectivity there, but nothing too bad, and it generally performs pretty well in my experience. The movement is a Miyota 9039, so that's going to carry through with the 9 series that you saw on the ArgoMatic as well, but now going to the no date variant, as you can see here. But it comes with everything you expect for a 9 series, which means you're going to have, it's an automatic movement, higher beat, 28,800 beats per hour, hacking, hand winding, nice reliable movement, all that kind of good stuff. As far as the water resistance, it's coming with 100 meters or 10 atmospheres of water resistance. For the weight, on this strap, it's coming in at 66.4 grams, so really quite light. Additionally though, as I mentioned, there is a bracelet that's included, and here's the ArgoMatic we'll check out further, but this is the bandolier style bracelet. It's actually a carryover, so here this is my personal ArgoMatic, but it's going to be the same style bracelet. The color might slightly vary between these, however it's pretty darn close and it's going to stay with the gunmetal. But sized to my wrist, this is coming in at 129.8 grams on the bracelet, and again we'll check that out as we go through. So now that we have the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and dive straight into the model and get a better feel for what this is actually like. As far as the colors, this is going to be available in 3 variants. There's the blue that we're looking at today, but then there's additionally a red accented version and a silver version. You'll notice that it is a PVD, black PVD for both the blue and the red, and then you do have just a straight stainless steel silver case, but we'll talk about that further. The basic layout of each of these is going to be the same, and that is a huge amount of layers. So you actually have 5 concentric circles that are applied. In the middle, you have the meteorite, so that the kind of mainstay of this dial. Then as you work out from there, you're going to have like a sand type texture there with the black. Then you're going to have your color accent, so in this case blue, but it applies with the same with the other colors as well. Then as you step out further, you can see you do go back to that sand texture. And then out on the farthest perimeter, you actually have like a machined aluminum look for a chapter ring applied there as well. So that's really slick. In that layer right outside of the meteorite, you can see that there are applied Roman numerals. On the meteorite itself, there is printing at the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock position. At the 12 o'clock position, you'll notice it has black for just the Gravithin namesake, and then down at the 6 o'clock position, it just simply has automatic. So it's a nice clean dial aesthetic overall, which is good, especially with so many things going on. One of the things that's really cool when you look at that out on the perimeter with that aluminum chapter ring, it actually has ball milled little hashes all the way around. So that's a nice nod, and I think keeps with the overall round theme for this. At the 5-minute increments, you'll notice it's subtle, but they are slightly larger than the ones in between. It's hard to differentiate to the naked eye until you're doing a real close inspection, but it is a nice little touch. On the crystal, one of the things that's real neat here is it actually has somewhat of a chapter ring that's applied to that as well. So you can see it's going to have a loom pattern, as we'll check out, but it additionally has your 5-minute hashes, which I think better calls attention than the slight differential in the milled texture of the actual chapter ring on the dial also. Shifting over to the hardware, The hardware on this for both the hour and minute hand are what I would describe as being like a blasted spear. So they have like a little bit of a matte coloration to that, or texture to that. And they are going to be more of like a silver, subdued silver coloration, which I think does blend fairly well with the meteorite. So it loses a little bit of legibility there with that natural meteorite kind of finish. However, you pick it up as you go out through the rings, so no issues with legibility there. As far as the second hand, this is going to be accented, so you have a red color accent for your second hand. It's a nice, long, delicate second hand. It actually peeks out at the tip over the chapter ring, so you can see that glides just underneath of that printing that you have on the crystal. Additionally, though, for the counterbalance, you can see it has like a spyglass kind of construction, and that achieves some neat effects there. Not only when it's riding over the Gravithin do you get that visual effect where you can actually truly use it like a spyglass and see the text coming through. Since that's not curved, it's only for part of it that it's perfectly centered, but you can see that text through there. Additionally, though, one of the things that I like is when the light hits it just right, it actually applies a neat shadow going across the meteorite as well, and that's a cool effect, especially being against a meteorite, to have that round shadow going through there. As far as the loom application, the loom application on this is typical of what you would expect for both the hour and minute hand, where it's a traditional kind of application. But then looking at the actual crystal, you can see that printed loom, or that printed pattern, is actually loomed as well. So that's a really cool feature and accent, and I think especially with this being somewhat of a planetary or space theme, I think that that's a welcome touch there. Printed loom isn't generally going to perform the best in the world, but I found this to be adequate for what it is, and then of course, being a traditional filled for the hands, that should perform well. Shifting over to the case, as you can see, it does have more or less a one-piece kind of construction. This is going to be consistent with the ArgoMatic in that they offer a very traditional round shape. So no real curvatures, it's just a straight round to that. And then again, as we talked about, it does have down at the bottom what looks like almost like a lower or mid case for it. However, that's just the kind of visual effect there. I'm not certain if that's actually full one-piece milled, but it does appear to be that at the naked eye. As mentioned previously, this is available, so it's all stainless steel, 316L stainless steel. There's the variant we're looking at here, which is a PVD coated black, but then there's additionally, on the silver version, it actually does come with a silver case as well. As we mentioned, it is principally a round construction, but it does have a taper up towards the top. So not only do you have the step down from the very far, from the lowest portion of the case, it steps down from there, and then it actually tapers pretty aggressively towards the top, which I think brings in and gives almost that kind of like integrated bezel effect. Additionally, one of the more interesting accents is it does have milled grooves applied, very cleanly milled out as you go through there, and I think that's a cool visual effect. So I like that accent, and I think it keeps with the overall circular feel that you have. We've already looked at and talked about the hidden lugs here, which I would say, again, they're partially hidden. It does tuck underneath of the case, however, the lugs themselves do slightly protrude out from there. Additionally, you might have noticed that this has a somewhat flat bottom, however, it does have a subtle curvature to that, and it's almost, especially with this caseback being nested so nicely, it's almost flush with the caseback with that downturn. On the crown side, you can see there's technically no integrated crown guard. However, with that lower portion of the case kicking out, it does serve as somewhat of a crown guard there. As we'll talk about here in just a second, it doesn't impede the crown though. Which, speaking of the crown itself, this is actually quite small. It's only coming in at 4.4 millimeters. Ordinarily, that might be problematic, but visually, I think it actually fits the overall case pretty well. I wouldn't necessarily want to see that kicked up too much. And fortunately, functionally, I haven't had any impacts there either. That's partly owing to the fact that this is a push-pull construction, but one of the biggest things you might have just seen me do there is it does actually have the groove, just like the case, milled into the crown. So that makes it very easy to pinch a hold of, especially with your fingernails. Even with my short fingernails, you can grab that, no problems whatsoever, and you can pop that crown. So I haven't had any issues there. Additionally, there is a subtle T that is signed on the outside of the crown as well. Shifting over to the caseback, as we looked at from the side profile there, it's a very slim caseback application. So that's nicely incorporated into the back. I like the fact that that doesn't add a lot of bulge. This is a screw-in construction, and it does feature an exhibition window in the back. As with the ArgoMatic, it is significantly smaller than the actual caseback itself, so it's inlaid in there, though in the case of the ArgoMatic, that's a much bigger differential because of the larger size of the ArgoMatic. There is a subtle printing that's actually a black text that is printed on, or black hashes that are printed on the actual exhibition glass itself. And then there is very small subtle text on the actual case back as that's printed there. The rotor itself is slightly customized, I believe, though that might be standard on the 9 series, but it has like almost like a carbide kind of application or effect, like kind of the, if you're familiar with like carbide grinding discs or what have you, out on the perimeter of that rotor. Similarly, it does have, with being the 9 series, it does have the Geneva striping that one is known for decoration. Shifting over to the bracelets and straps. The bracelet, as I mentioned, it does come with the bandolier style bracelet. That is going to be tapered from 20 millimeters at the lugs down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. With being a bandolier style bracelet, one of the things that you will notice is that it has limited articulation. So this fits almost like a fixed style bracelet, and the same thing is true as far as for the sizing. They're not the smallest links in the world, though I haven't found them to be overly large either. So you can probably get that dialed in pretty well, but being with the butterfly clasp, something to be aware of is I find this to be a little less forgiving than many, even with a butterfly clasp would be, because of the limited articulation of the bracelet. But that's common of a bandolier, that's just owing to that style those tend to wear in that manner. As far as the butterfly clasp itself, it's exactly what you'd expect. It is signed on the bracelet link, but then on the inside, it does have a standard double pusher, and then it does have a milled bridge that's for that. And in the case of this black or gunmetal, that PVD coating is applied there also. The bandolier is going to have quick release spring bars, and it is held in with pins, so you don't have to worry about screws backing out. So that's always a trade-off there. I know a lot of people like the ease of initial setup with screws, but then hate when they back out. So pins are nice; you don't have to worry about that. Shifting over to the strap itself is again going to be tapered. It's going to have a similar pattern in overall wear characteristic, but this is a leather strap. It's what I would describe as like a suede texture on the exterior. On the underside, just as with the bandolier, it does have quick release spring bars. You can see signed, as well as the Italian leather that's noted there. It does additionally have a signed buckle, which again does match the overall finishing of the case, which in this case, the PVD. All right, so now that we have all that out of the way, let's go ahead and bring in some comps. I'll bring back that ArgoMatic. You can see just the huge difference in the scale here. One, you do see, again, the kind of concentric circle theming that you had on the ArgoMatic carries over here, but in a very different manner. But one of the things that you'll notice, though, this difference between the 42 millimeter versus a 40 millimeter, to my eye, it looks hugely different than 2 millimeters. However, that's the actual specs for the two, but that just gives you an idea of the visual. As far as the case, you can see it's going to be very different, as far as with this one being more of like a somewhat slab kind, whereas this was kind of an undercut and like almost like a flying saucer, but then it did have a taller case back as well. Bringing in, here's just a more traditional fixed bezel. So this is an MMI Sky Hunter, and this is around, both of the ones we're going to check out next are around 39 millimeters, just gives you an idea as far as sizing. I think it's pretty commensurate with what you'd expect for overall sizing as far as the dial presence between those two. And then bringing in, this is sticking kind of with the space theme here. This is the Zelos Comet, and obviously the NASA edition there. With a white dial, you can see that wears a little bit larger in my experience. White dials tend to present a little bigger, but I think visually, again, you can see they're relatively similar as far as overall sizing between those. All right, so now that we have all that out of the way, you hopefully have a better feel for this watch. But let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of some positives, some critiques, as well as the summary. For the positives, one of the things that's true of all of the designs to date, they are very original designs. I appreciate not only the usage of the layering, and then of course the incorporation of the meteorite for there at a reasonable price point, which we'll talk about here again in a second. But across the board, whether you love it or hate it, I do appreciate that they're trying to do something different. As far as the pricing, at around $409, I think you're getting a pretty good package for the money. It's definitely not what I would call a value home run, but I think it is fair pricing for a Miyota 9 series. I found the finishing to be pretty solid. Getting a bracelet, a strap, all that kind of stuff comes with just a nice standard box. All those kind of good things as well. The loom pattern, I think, is a lot of fun. I think especially with this being somewhat of a niche kind of a design to begin with, I think going with something that is a little more of a quirky loom accent, I think was a good call, and I actually enjoyed that. Additionally, I think that this should fit pretty much every wrist out there. As obviously this is going to owe to preference here, but with this round style design and having a crazy short lug to lug of only 37.2 millimeters, I don't think for people with larger wrists, I don't think it's necessarily going to wear too small. Yes, it doesn't have a ton of case presence, but these round watches, just like with smartwatches, they wear a little bit unique. It's hard to really pin down, just kind of like with square watches, but I think this should be pretty versatile overall. For most people, depending on your preference, I definitely prefer this over the ArgoMatic sizing, which was a bit large for my wrist at the 42 millimeters. So what about the critiques? One is I have to mention is going to be legibility. Despite the fact that this has the pronounced 5-minute hashes on the crystal, you have the surface changes there, so that's it takes a little bit of getting used to, though it's pretty intuitive. But then looking at the milled hashes, as I already mentioned, there isn't a lot of differentiation between the larger mill at the 5-minute increments versus the smaller on the single increments. So what that results, without having any color changes or anything else, is you have a pretty uniform pattern. So without looking at the the crystal rather, to see the 5-minute increment and then referencing off of that and then kind of counting from there, it isn't the most quick or easy to get precision legibility. Similarly, the same thing is true with having like the Roman numerals on there. Across the board, you've just got a lot of layer changes and a lot of places to reference for that. So yes, you can get precision legibility, but it's not the most legible watch that I've ever checked out. Additionally, despite the fact that this is actually a relatively slim case, being under 11 millimeters for an automatic watch, I do think it wears and seems thicker than it is. And I think that's partly owing to this round, somewhat slab kind of construction here. I don't think it's too thick by any means, but I do think the sub 11 millimeters is a little bit deceiving. Ordinarily, you have kind of that case taper with the lugs and things that visually, I think, slim it out. Similarly, with this of being a little bit of a slab kind of look there, I do think it all seems to heighten it as far as just the visual feel and effect. And then, as I already alluded to in the positive section, this is one of those things, it's a niche kind of piece here. So this is one that I think you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. It's definitely going a little bit on the quirky side, but I don't think too much so that it keeps it from being a relatively practical watch that you can wear for typical casual wear. I personally wouldn't dress it up, but that being said, you can do whatever you want. They're your watches. So that with all of that being said, my personal view of this, as I mentioned, is I think that at the end of the day, I appreciate what they're doing with this. I appreciate that they're trying to find their niche within the market, and they are really going for something as far as with this planetary theme. They've kept that through as far as their inspiration, and I think it's pretty well thought out in that regard. Again, that's not going to be for everyone, but I will say, for me, one of the biggest things that I find as an improvement on this versus the ArgoMatic, as I already mentioned, is just the sizing. With that being a 42 millimeter case with a straight round case, I think the 40 millimeter is going to please a lot more people for sizing, and I think that's going to win some people over. Obviously, larger wristed folks might find it to be too small, but I think it's going to be more popular than the ArgoMatic as far as that size goes. So there you have it. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you did like it, as always, give that like button a tap. If you haven't already done so, smash that subscribe button, and then drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you like the design at all? Is it too quirky for you? Which of the colors do you like? All that kind of good stuff. Thanks for watching.